Most men never become rich not because they lack discipline, intelligence, music, or opportunity, but because they wait too long to give themselves permission to live differently. They postpone freedom. They postpone ease. They postpone dignity. They tell themselves they'll live fully later after the money comes, after the breakthrough, after the number in the bank finally justifies it. Machiavelli warned that power is rarely seized by those who wait for certainty. It is taken by those who move as if the outcome is inevitable. This video is about why you must live like a millionaire before you become one. Because if you don't, you will unknowingly train yourself into a life that can never hold real wealth. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you live like a struggling man while trying to become wealthy, you are wiring your habits, decisions, and identity around survival instead of control. You become efficient at scarcity. You get good at delay. You master endurance instead of leverage. And by the time the money finally shows up, music, if it ever does, you won't know how to use it without destroying it. History is filled with men who acquired wealth briefly and lost it just as fast. Music, not because they were foolish, but because their lives were built for smallness. Machiavelli observed that fortune favors the prepared mind, not the hopeful one. What you're about to learn in this video solves a specific problem most people never identify. It shows you how to reclaim time before you are rich, how to stabilize your life before the big win, and how to experience the freedom people associate with millionaires long before $1 million ever touches your hands. If you don't understand this, the cost isn't music, just financial. The cost is decades of your life spent trading hours for survival. Postponing joy, postponing choice, postponing the version of yourself that could have existed much, music, earlier. Most people think living like a millionaire means excess, flash, or irresponsibility. Music, that misunderstanding alone keeps them trapped. The elites Machiavelli studied didn't wait to live well after they won. Living well was part of how they won. They structured their lives around time, leverage, and control. First, and money followed as a consequence. If you miss this principle, you can work hard your entire life and still, music, arrive tired, resentful, and late. So, before we talk about tactics, before we talk about formulas, before we talk about numbers, we have to dismantle the lies that keep people mentally poor, even when opportunity is right in front of them. And it starts, music, with one belief that sounds smart, feels responsible, and quietly ruins almost everyone who accepts it. We've been taught a lot of lies about money. Music, and whether people admit it or not, almost everyone listening has absorbed at least a few of them. One of the most common lies sounds, music, harmless, even wise on the surface. You've heard it 1,000 times. People say it casually, like it's truth carved into stone. They say time is money. But that statement is not just wrong. It's destructive. It's one of the most tragic lies ever planted into the modern mind because it quietly manufactures poverty while convincing people they're being practical. Machiavelli warned that the most dangerous lies are the ones repeated so often they stop being questioned. This is one of them. Now, before we go any further, let me address something directly because I already know how this goes. Anytime someone speaks openly about wealth, money, or getting rich, there's a small group of people who get uncomfortable. They don't usually engage directly. They don't say, "Why do you talk about this?" They say things like, "This guy or people like him." Or they attach labels, insults, moral accusations. Music, Machiavelli understood this pattern perfectly. He wrote that when a man speaks about power openly, those without it feel exposed and exposure feels like, music, threat. Money is power. Time is power. So people react emotionally instead of rationally. The reason I talk about money is simple. It affects every single day of your life. Whether you love it or hate it, money decides where you live, who you spend your time with, how much stress you carry, and how much freedom you actually have. Most people spend the majority of their waking hours trying to get it, manage it, or recover from not having enough of it. Machiavelli observed that men are driven not by ideals, but by necessity. And money sits right at the center of modern necessity. A lot of people don't even realize why they're uncomfortable with conversations about music, wealth. It's because they've never clearly defined what rich actually means. Compared to most of the world, almost everyone watching this is already wealthy. But that comparison doesn't help you sleep at night, doesn't buy back your time, and doesn't remove the pressure you feel every month. Words like rich, wealthy, abundant, prosperous. People react to them emotionally instead of logically. Machiavelli would tell you that words only become dangerous when people surrender their thinking to them. History, music, shows us something important. The men who built empires, dynasties, and enduring power never treated money as shameful. The Medici didn't apologize for understanding music, finance. Venetian merchants didn't pretend trade was immoral. They understood that resources amplify intention. Money doesn't make you virtuous or corrupt. It reveals what you already are. I talk about money because when people lack it, life feels suffocating. It may, music, not be oxygen, but it feels close. When bills stack up, music, options disappear. When options disappear, people compromise their values, their time, and eventually, music, themselves. Machiavelli wrote that necessity breaks loyalty faster than fear. Poverty is necessity in its most constant form. And here's something else most people miss. When leaders throughout history wanted to reach people, they spoke first to the problems those people already felt. Hunger, safety, survival, security. They didn't start with abstractions. They started with what hurt. Only later did they elevate the conversation. That's strategy. That's persuasion. That's reality. You don't ignore what dominates people's thoughts and expect them to listen. The real issue isn't that money is discussed. It's that most people have never been taught how it actually works. They inherit beliefs from institutions, authority figures, or cultural petition and never test them. Machiavelli warned that men who rely on borrowed thinking become tools of other men's systems. If you disagree with what's being said here, that's fine. Disagreement isn't weakness. Unexamined belief is study, test, think. That's all. Now, let's get to the core, music, of this. The reason so many people stay stuck isn't laziness. It's not intelligence. Music, it's not even opportunity. It's belief. And one belief in particular quietly sabotages almost everyone who accepts it. The idea that time is money. Once that idea lodges itself in your mind, it shapes every financial decision you make, every job you accept, music, and every hour you sell. And you don't even realize it's happening. Before we dismantle music, that lie completely, take a moment and reflect. Do you agree with the idea that time is money? Or does something about it already feel off to you? Drop a comment with one word that describes how you feel about that idea right now. And if this way of thinking resonates with you, subscribe and join a growing community of men who are learning to think independently, music, about money, power, and freedom instead of inheriting beliefs that keep them small. Because once you see why time is not money, you'll never trade your life the same, music, way again. So, let's slow this down, music, and actually think because this is where most people nod along without letting the idea penetrate. When someone says time is money, it sounds efficient, music, disciplined, even responsible. But Machiavelli warned that the most dangerous errors are logical shortcuts that feel practical. This is one of those shortcuts. Time is not money. Time is greater than money. Infinitely greater. And the reason this matters is because how you value time determines how you live your life. Here's something simple. If you lose money, you can replace it. You might not like how you replace it, but you can. If you lose time, music, it's gone. There is no recovery, no refund, no extension. That alone should tell you the equation is false. Music, and yet people repeat it like doctrine. Machiavelli wrote that men are ruined, music, not by ignorance but by stubbornly clinging to beliefs that no longer serve them. Clear's throat, this belief ruins people quietly. Let's do a thought experiment because reality exposes truth faster than philosophy. If someone walked into the room right now and said, "I'll give you $1 million today," every hand would go up. No hesitation. But if they added one condition that you have to end your life today, suddenly nobody wants the money. Why? Because without anyone teaching you, without a book, without a lecture, you already know time is more valuable than money. Your instincts know it. Even if your words contradict it. Flip it around. Imagine you discover you have a serious illness. The treatment isn't covered. It costs a large sum of money, but it works every time. No debate, no uncertainty. You'd spend the money. Why? Because what you're buying isn't comfort or luxury. You're buying time. And time outranks money every single time. Machiavelli understood this hierarchy long before modern economics. He observed that power lies not in possession but in music, duration. Whoever controls duration controls outcomes. So if we already know instinctively that time outranks money, why do people live as if the opposite is true? Because beliefs, music, shape behavior more than logic. If you tell yourself time is money, you'll treat them as equals. And when, music, people treat two unequal things as equal, they always sacrifice the more valuable one first. That's how this lie destroys lives. Here's what happens in practice. People waste enormous amounts of time trying to save small amounts of money. They drive across town to save a few dollars. They spend hours doing tasks that could be outsourced cheaply. They exhaust themselves to feel responsible. Meanwhile, the most valuable asset they have, their limited life, is bleeding out in small, music, increments. Machiavelli would call this strategic blindness. Let music, me make this practical. There are tasks that cost money and tasks that, music, cost time. Money tasks can be replaced. Time tasks cannot. When you choose, music, to spend hours doing low-value work to avoid paying someone else, you're not being disciplined. You're mispricing your life. Elite families understood this centuries ago. Nobility didn't polish their own armor or till their own land. Not because they were lazy, but because they understood leverage. Time was reserved for decisions, relationships, and strategy. This isn't arrogance. Music, it's prioritization. The moment you start valuing your time more than money, your decisions change. You stop, music, asking, how can I save a few dollars, and start asking, is this worth my life energy? That question alone, music, separates people who stay stuck from people who move forward. There's also a deeper consequence. When you sell your time cheaply, you train yourself to believe your life is cheap. Music, Machiavelli warned that men who grow accustomed to low valuation eventually, music, accept low treatment. Trading hours for survival wages doesn't just drain your schedule, it reshapes your identity. And here's the irony. Even people who say they don't care about money behave like they care about it more than time. They'll sacrifice evenings, weekends, relationships, health, all to avoid spending cash. That contradiction tells you everything. Words don't reveal values. Behavior does. Once you see this clearly, something uncomfortable happens. You realize that many of the financial habits you were praised for are actually keeping you trapped. And that realization forces a bigger question. If time is infinitely more valuable than money, then why are we taught to treat saving money as the highest virtue? That question matters because the next belief people cling to is even more dangerous than time is money. And once we break that one, the entire system collapses. Before we go there, pause for a moment. Do you agree that time has been undervalued in your own life? Or do you still believe money deserves equal weight? Share your honest reflection in the comments. So, now that we've established something most people never fully confront, that time is infinitely more valuable than music, money, we have to look at the next belief that quietly keeps people stuck. This one is almost sacred. People defend it emotionally. They were taught it early. They repeat it proudly. The belief is that saving money is the responsible path to security. I'm going to challenge that directly because Machiavelli taught that, music, traditions survive long after they stop producing results. Saving money in the way most people are taught to do it is one of those traditions. Let me be precise because, music, people get defensive here. I'm not talking about being wasteful. I'm not talking about throwing money away. Music. I'm talking about the idea that parking money in savings and slowly stacking it over decades is the path to freedom. That idea collapses the moment you do basic math. And Machiavelli, music, would say that any system that collapses under simple arithmetic is not wisdom. It's illusion. So let's do the math calmly without emotion. At the rate you're saving money right now, how long will it take you to save $1 million? I use a million not because it's magical, but because it's simple, one with easy to visualize. Now, imagine someone saves $100 a month. That feels responsible. That feels disciplined. That feels like what people are praised for. At that rate, it takes over 800 years to reach a million. That's not a plan. That's fantasy disguised as virtue. Okay, maybe you do better. Maybe you save $1,000 a month. That's impressive by most standards. Even then, music, it takes over 80 years. By the time you arrive, you're exhausted. Music, your best years are gone, and inflation has quietly eroded what you thought you were building. Machiavelli, music, observed that men often win battles long after the war has already ended. That's what saving like this looks like. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Most people aren't saving anywhere near $1,000 a month. So, what they're really doing is clinging to a strategy that mathematically guarantees they will never reach meaningful financial freedom. Not because they're lazy, not because they're unintelligent, but because they were handed a rule that benefits institutions, not individuals. Banks understand this, music, perfectly. They pay you less interest than inflation, always. That means the money you're saving is quietly shrinking in real value while sitting still. Machiavelli wrote that power structures never explain the rules in full to those they profit from. This is one of those rules. Now let's imagine a different scenario. Suppose through inheritance, luck, or an unexpected opportunity, you come into $1 million. Not because you saved it, but because life happened. Here's the question most people never ask. Music, what makes you wealthy at that point? Is it the pile of cash or what that cash produces? If you spend the principal, the wealth disappears. So the only logical move is to live on what the money generates. Let's say that million produces a modest return. Nothing aggressive, nothing risky, just enough to generate consistent income. Music, now suddenly something changes. You're not just receiving, money. You're buying your time back. You're no longer trading hours of your life for survival income. That's the shift most people never make. Wealth isn't money. Wealth is income that does not require your presence. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago when he wrote about princes who lived off systems rather than labor. They didn't wake up every day wondering how to earn. Their structures did the earning for them. When you break it down monthly, something powerful becomes obvious. If a certain amount of invested capital produces a certain amount of monthly income, then anything else that produces the same monthly income is mathematically equivalent. This is where most people's minds snap open for the first time. Cash flow equals wealth. Not someday, not later, right now. This realization changes everything because now the goal is no longer to hoard money slowly. The goal is to create, systems that produce income repeatedly. Once you see that, the idea of saving your way to freedom feels almost absurd. Before we move forward, I want you to pause and reflect honestly at the rate you're currently saving. Does it actually lead to freedom, in a time frame that respects your life? Or have you been following a strategy you've never questioned? Comment either math doesn't lie or I need a new plan, whichever, feels true for you, because once you accept that cash flow is the real goal, the next question becomes unavoidable. How do you build it without waiting decades? Once you understand that wealth is not a pile of money but a stream of income, that keeps flowing whether you wake up early or sleep and everything shifts. This is where the idea of the virtual millionaire comes in. Not a person with a mansion, exotic cars, and constant display, but someone who lives with the freedom and stability people associate with millionaires long before $1 million ever shows up in their account. Machiavelli wrote that the appearance of power often matters less than its function. This is about function. This is about control over your time. Here's the principle. If a certain amount of invested capital produces a certain monthly income, then anything else that produces that same income gives you the same lifestyle. That's not philosophy. That's arithmetic. And once you accept that, the question stops being how do I save more and becomes how do I get paid repeatedly. That's how elites think. That's how institutions think. That's how systems are built. Most people already live with continuity. They just don't benefit from it. Bills hit every month like clockwork. Subscriptions renew automatically. Payments leave your account whether you remember them or not. Machiavelli would call this unintentional, music, obedience. The mistake isn't having bills on autopilot. Music, the mistake is having no income on autopilot to balance them. Elites, music, flip this. They design their lives so money flows in continuously, not occasionally. One of the, music, simplest ways to do this is through membership-based systems. People pay monthly for access to information, guidance, or community. This isn't new. Guilds did it, Mize did it. Modern platforms just made it digital. Another path is paid newsletters. Curated insight delivered consistently, music, paid for consistently. Some charge modest amounts, others charge premiums. The number matters less than the structure. Repetition is power. Then there's the model institutions love most, being the bank. Instead of paying, music, interest, you collect it. Instead of making one sale, you create, music, payment plans. Coaching programs, education, specialized skills, all structured so payments arrive week after week, month after month.